Good evening and welcome to Poland Daily. I'm Richardson and this is the news. A summit of Prime Ministers of the Visegrad Group and the Chancellor of Germany, Angela Merkel, took place today in the Slovak capital, Bratislava. The reason for the summit was the 30th anniversary of political changes in Central and Eastern Europe, which led to the fall of the Berlin Wall and German reunification.
Trade exchange, economic cooperation, Brexit, this year's European Parliament election and the future European budget are the main topics of the summit of representatives of the Visegrad Group and the Chancellor of Germany, Angela Merkel. The Visegrad Group countries have annual trade with Germany worth €250 billion. That's a lot more than the amount of Berlin's trade with countries such as China, France and the United States, so naturally there's a lot to talk about. The summit touched on the subject of migration as well. The project to help the countries of North Africa, mostly Morocco, has been adopted. 4 Visegrad Group countries, along with Germany, are supposed to work together to help Morocco. Polish Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki emphasized that the United States and the European Union are the linchpin of safety and democracy, and that we should bolster cooperation. The summit in Bratislava took place on the commemoration of the 30th anniversary of the fall of the Berlin Wall and the groundbreaking year 1989. The political changes in Central Eastern Europe led to the reunification of Germany. We are indebted to those who are with us today. In 1968, Hungary helped us, then Poland and Czechoslovakia opened the door for East Germany in 1989. All this led us to be a reunified country in the European Union and NATO. We'll never forget it.
On this 30th anniversary of regaining independence, we emphasized the role of solidarity and other events like the Prague Spring, which showed us the way to freedom. In 1989, I was at the same square as Viktor Orban. Back then, the countries were waking up after the sad period of communism. Today, we see that Germany, along with the Visegrad Group countries, are driving force in raising the competition for an ambitious budget for another 7 years.
The previous meeting of the Visegrad Group with the Chancellor of Germany, Angela Merkel, took place in 2016 in Warsaw. In 2 weeks, Visegrad Group Prime Ministers will meet with the Prime Minister of Israel in Israel, which will be the first summit taking place in a country that is not a part of the Visegrad Group.
Donald Tusk, President of the European Council, has caused some controversy with his remarks about Brexit. During a press conference, after talks in Brussels with Irish Prime Minister Leo Varadkar, Tusk spoke of a special place in hell for those who promoted Brexit without even a sketch of a plan of how to carry it out. Downing Street said it was a question for him whether he considers the use of that kind of language helpful.
Tusk's problems began with these words, which the President of the European Council said after his meeting with Irish Prime Minister Leo Varadkar.
I've been wondering what that special place in hell looks like for those who promoted Brexit without even a sketch of a plan how to carry it safely.
The Irish Prime Minister immediately sensed that Tusk was asking for trouble. Indeed, the British press spared no effort in criticizing Tusk. The Sun described him as a patronizing fool and said that he wasted no opportunity to offend the British Prime Minister. He knows that he will not accept any agreement that divides the United Kingdom and realizes that his comments yesterday make May's life more difficult, although he pretends to respect her, wrote the Daily. Politicians also think that Tusk's words are unworthy and offensive to all who worked on the agreement and the 70.5 million Brits who voted for Brexit.
And clearly the pressure is beginning to mount in Brussels. We've seen that today from some of the responses, particularly from the President Donald Tusk. I think it was deliberately provocative, I have to say, very disrespectful to those of us who voted to leave the European Union. He should reflect on what he had to say.
This man has no manners. This is an extremely deplorable and absolutely unhelpful statement, was the view of the leader of the House of Commons, Conservative MP Andrea Leadsom. She also added that Tusk's comment was totally unacceptable and disgraceful. Tusk's statement was also commented on by Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki on Twitter. Instead of sending anyone to hell, together we will find a solution that will be good for the EU, but also allow us to have a strong business partner in Britain after #Brexit. The goal of all must be the interest of Poland and the future of the community, regardless of its shape. Theresa May came to Brussels today once again to talk about renegotiation of the existing Brexit agreement. After yesterday's attack by Tusk, it will be difficult to have a good atmosphere for his talks with the head of the British government.
The Polish MP, Stefan Niesiołowski, has denied allegations being made against him by the state prosecutor. According to the politician, he is an innocent victim of the Central Anti-Corruption Bureau. Last week, the Bureau revealed that Niesiołowski is accused of rigging contracts for 3 businessmen from Łódź in exchange for receiving services from prostitutes on multiple occasions.
Niesiołowski believes this entire issue has been fabricated against him. What the Central Anti-Corruption Bureau is doing is a disgrace. They spit in my face, they are destroying my family. What extraordinary infamy. The prosecution is always saying some information is confidential within an investigation. What about my case? Is there no confidentiality? The Super Express Daily stated that there is more and more evidence becoming public concerning this sex scandal, including video footage as well as telephone recordings. The prosecution would like the Member of Parliament to face charges of corruption, as they appear to have evidence that Niesiołowski often traded sexual favours. Officers of the Łódź branch of the Central Anti-Corruption Bureau detained 3 businessmen involved in corruption. Within the investigation, CAB officers established that the businessmen would trade favours with one of the members of the Polish parliament, in turn receiving favourable decisions from the local government of Łódź and other public institutions. The detained men were taken to the prosecutors to hear the charges. Stefan Niesiołowski argues he is innocent. When asked by Super Express journalists whether he had ever used the services of a prostitute, he answered, "This is malice. What kind of question is this? This requires a conversation, some sort of explanatory statement. I will not be debating with the CAB or the prosecution in this way. They manufactured this." The Member of Parliament said that he will renounce his immunity. Last week, the Prosecutor General sent a request asking the Marshal of the Sejm to remove his immunity to allow Niesiołowski to be criminally liable.
The Yellow Vest protest movement in France has in recent weeks concentrated on demanding increased civil rights, especially the right for national referendums to be called and their results to be binding if enough signatures demanding the referendum are collected. French President Emmanuel Macron seems unwilling to meet their demands and instead wishes to solve the political crisis by limiting the freedom of assembly. According to a new bill, measures which hitherto have only applied to combating football hooligans would also be able to be used against political protesters.
The new anti-rioting law passed the vote in Parliament with 387 votes for and 92 against. It will now be sent on to the Senate. The most controversial aspect of the new legislation is that it will allow administrative rather than judicial authorities to impose bans on individuals they consider pose a threat to public order. The person doesn't have to ever have been sentenced for a crime and would still have to remain at the local police station for the duration of the protest. Many protesters are shocked by the new legislation and argue that it shows just how out of touch Macron is with the people. According to them, the many cases of police brutality witnessed during the 3-month-long protests make it necessary for new legislation which would prevent the French police from excessive use of tear gas and other less lethal weapons such as the flashball gun, which uses rubber bullet ammunition. 50 MPs from Macron's own party abstained from voting, and the opposition to the new bill from other parties in parliament was overwhelming. Many concentrated their criticism against the Minister of Interior, Christopher Castaner.
Depuis le 17 novembre, Monsieur le Ministre.
Since November 17th, Minister Christopher Castaner, you've been the unfortunate bookkeeper of a terrifying count. 12 deaths, 1,800 protesters wounded, 1,200 wounded police. Since the events of the Algerian war, no protest has resulted in such a terrible outcome, in such a tragic and heavy outcome. MPs from the left side of the political spectrum were also highly critical of the proposed legislation. And you, Minister of Interior, continue to tell us that in order to defend the right to protest, we must restrain the protesters. We do not accept this logic. We do not accept its politically perverse character. Representative of President Macron's party argue that the legislation is needed for the safety of the demonstrators themselves. Our fellow citizens who want to protest peacefully and simply come and go are now scared of doing so. It's time for this to stop. Smashing shop fronts and brushing against the authorities are not the way to have an impact on people's minds. The new law will still have to pass the Senate and be signed by President Macron before coming into force.
That's it from the news. Thank you for watching. Do stay with us for the weather, business and more from Poland Daily. But in the meantime, from me, it's good night and have a better tomorrow.
I'm Aleksandra Zarzycka and welcome to Poland Daily Weather. Let's take a look at the forecast for tonight. A snow will appear in the northwest. Temperatures ranging between -2 degrees in the east to 1 degree in the coast. In central Poland, temperatures ranging about -2 degrees. Overcast skies without snow in central and in the east. Cloudless in Małopolska and Górny Śląsk. And now over to tomorrow. Rainfall is expected across the Poland. More sun will appear on the northwest. Snow with rain is expected in the east and in central Poland. The temperatures will range from 4 to 8 degrees. Let's see the forecast for the following 3 days. Saturday will be an overcast day in central and northern eastern Poland, a maximum 9 degrees in the coast. More sun will appear on Sunday. Temperatures is ranging from 4 to 8 degrees. On Monday, overcast weather almost across the country, but northwestern Poland will stay sunny. A maximum 7 degrees and a minimum 5 degrees in the northeast. Thank you for watching and goodbye.
Poland Daily Business Edition. Tonight, the topic that you are all waiting for, because finally we will talk about celebrites. Jeff Bezos and his wife McKinsey are divorcing, and this is why we will talk to Olaf Wojak about the economic consequences of this divorce. $135.4 billion of Amazon will be split by half. Each of the couple will get half of it. And does it changes situation of the person who is half as rich as he was before?
Thank you very much for the invitation. Good evening. Yes, I think this is a very interesting topic, and not just because he's a celebrity, but because he's a business owner, and because he owns so much money, so much land, and he invests money in so many different platforms and things that are going on. That this is really something that concerns all of us. So I hope. And we have this kind of a thought at Adam Smith Center that maybe this is a way of getting out of the IRS. I mean, he was, till now, he looked as a reasonable person who knew exactly what to do with his own money. And as for now, Jeff Bezos wasn't someone that would like to give away half of his ownings. So we hope this is a well-made plan just to get out with taxes, not to lose his fortune. Of course, it won't be lost. His wife would get half of it, but it would be pretty strange if he would really allow his own feelings to divide his ownings and to divide his own company, because Amazon is really. Well, they have a problem with his divorce. They're afraid of what's going to happen if it's all about money. This is all about feeling safe on the market and investing new money. But your question was, will he feel the same? Well, no. You have to remember that he owns money, but he doesn't own them as physically. I mean, they don't just lay around and he's not swimming inside. They're invested, so it's not very easy to just take this money and divide it. And sometimes it really costs a person. For instance, George Lucas, he was also divorcing, and he lost his companies that were really successful. For instance, Pixar. He had to sell it because he had to divide his ownings because of the divorce. So he lost a company that made hundreds of millions of dollars later because he needed those few millions on the side because of the divorce. So I hope this is not what's going to happen with Jeff Bezos, and we hope that this is well calculated, and cold calculated way of getting out of taxes, not to really lose his ownings and lose his half of his belongings.
Let's say a few words about Amazon, because that's a great opportunity. We had a company that was first on the market of online retail of physical objects. That's what Amazon started from the books. Then they added inventory. Right now it's a mega company selling worldwide the set of products, but yet its growth stalled, and subsequently the share price is slightly lower. Is it just because of the divorce of the Bezos couples, or this is because there are other contestants on this market?
Well, a few months ago, Jeff Bezos said that companies are they're not available always. There is a beginning of a company and there is an end of a company. He mentioned that he thinks that Amazon will be on the market for 30 years. He forgot in his countings that it's already on the market for more than 10 years. So then that means that the time is clicking, and it's there is an end of innovation and of big company. But I think they still have lots of time, and they're afraid of losing money for new investments. But you have to remember that Jeff Bezos and his team, because this is not only his decisions, these are decisions of his people, with lots of money that he's investing in different directions, in different technologies. He really made an impact on what is going on right now in the market. For instance, logistics. He built big warehouses which are automated. He made robotics available in those kind of companies.
That was absolutely pioneering job in the warehousing sector. Yes.
But you have to understand, this is only one of many sectors he invested in. There is even a term in business, burning money, and Jeff Bezos is well known for it, investing large quantities of money to try new things. And he knows that some of those things will make him richer, but in many cases he will lose those money, and he's not afraid. So it is important, if we have a rich person which is available and wants to invest in risky new technologies, because some of them will change our life and will make the world better. And if he's going to lose this kind of part of money, or having this money available for him, it means we all are going to lose with him. Of course, it's not you're going to get poorer tomorrow or the next year because he's going to get the divorce, but because the influence on the changes he's making. This is what really worries me.
But you can also flip the coin and say Jeff Bezos make money on killing the local storage, local shops, on killing the traditional way of doing business, because, okay, it's maybe more efficient, but you have lots of people who are losing on it.
The times are changing, and if he wouldn't do it, someone else would do it. So it's not a matter of excusing the change, it's a matter of times that are changing. But on the other hand, you have cheaper products, you can buy it cheaper, you can have it faster. So we shouldn't argue if it was correct or not. He was just the first one who picked up the glove and tried to do the new way. So am I happy that businesses are closing because there is Amazon and shops are not as popular as they were? No, of course not. In Poland, we have the same struggle with service very similar, Allegro, and there are also businesses that are losing. But this is not a matter of this business. This is a matter of times that are changing. We have internet. We want to have the goods fast, and we want to have them as cheap as possible. So on the end, the customer wins. But the biggest problem that we see in the Adam Smith Center is investing in his company that's exploring space. Jeff Bezos was investing and has a company called Blue Origin, which has big plans exploring the space. And we hope his divorce won't slow progress in building his own rockets and exploring the space, because this is something that we all count on. This is the future of humans. We have to go further outside of Earth, and I think he's a very, very important and main player in this future business?
Well, I would mention the other name who is a main player in this business. We are, by the way, expecting the first launch of the Falcon with human-graded capsule that is going to be connected to the
Elon Musk.
Yes, to the International Space Station. This is slightly longer than expected, but maybe in the next few weeks we will have this milestone.
Yes, but we need a competition. It's not good when there's only one player on the market. So we need a competition, and for Elon Musk, it's very important that Jeff Bezos is putting his own money into stake of exploring space. So I hope it won't slow out humanity, and there are going to be new innovations in the future, and his private life won't come as something worse for us in the future.
It is a matter of imagination. If you can imagine that you have 135 billion euros, maybe easier to imagine that you have only 67 billion euro. Olaf Wojak of Adam Smith Center.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this brief conversation, and that was it for tonight's Poland Daily Business.
I'm Aleksandra Zarzycka and welcome back to Poland Daily Weather. Let's take a look at tomorrow's forecast. Rainfall is expected across the Poland. More sun will appear in the northwest. Snow with rain is expected in the east and in central Poland. The temperatures will range from 4 to 8 degrees. And now let's tomorrow forecast for our continent. Snow with rain will dominate in Oslo with -6 degrees. Higher temperatures in Central Europe, there we see about 3 and 6 degrees. In Central Eastern Europe we will also see a lot of snow. There the temperatures will range from -2 degrees in Moscow to 3 in Kiev. Sunny weather in Iberian Peninsula and in Rome with about 15-16 degrees. Thank you for watching and goodbye.
Kolejny odcinek Republiki Sztuki.
Welcome to another episode of Republika Sztuki with Marcin Bonk and Janusz Janowski. We still can't leave the Baroque. It really is a huge, colorful era. It has so many layers. One of its elements is Polish Baroque, and I would like you to say a few words about Polish Baroque.
No rzeczywiście tutaj jest to ważny moment dla kultury polskiej barok.
It is indeed a very important moment for Polish culture. Baroque has grown with our culture to a very high level.
Późniejsze etapy rozwoju naszej na przykład architektury.
To the extent that further stages of development of our architecture have become strongly connected to this tradition.
Naszych miast. I właśnie architektura jest tą dziedziną.
And a good example of this are our towns. This architecture is a very important and widely developed field of art. Many amazing churches that we know, for example, the Church of St. Peter and Paul in Krakow, or the Visitationist Church in Warsaw and Krakow, or even the beautiful Royal Chapel in Gdańsk, were built in a Baroque style.
Rzeczywiście dla baroku poza architekturą bardzo ważne jest malarstwo i tutaj niewątpliwie też należy...
Although not only architecture is relevant to the Baroque style, but also painting. And we have to say a few words about portrait and court paintings, because serious artists first appeared in Poland thanks to the arrival of Italian court artists. Marcello Bicciarelli is the court master who created the magnificent images of King Stanisław Augustus II in the palace on the Isle in Łazienki Park. Also a very important and well-known portrait of Stanisław Augustus II with an hourglass, and this is perhaps the moment in Polish painting that should be regarded as a starting point and paramount to the official development of various trends.
Rozwoju różnych nurtów uznać za może początkowy, ważny.
Ale wciąż jest tak, że ściągamy...
Yes, quite so. We gathered artists, especially Italians. The surnames of Italian artists appear very often in this area, especially when it comes to fine arts, because we didn't have our own outstanding, famous Polish painters and artists. There is no Polish contribution in fine arts, but we do have our input in other fields, like Polish baroque poetry, created by Polish artists, also in Latin. And here we have Maciej Kazimierz Sabriewski, or other artists that began to influence Europe, but not when it comes to fine art. Why do we not have famous Polish baroque painters?
Natomiast sztuki plastyczne nie. Dlaczego nie ma polskich, barokowych, wielkich malarzy?
It seems that every region of Europe, every single place needed some kind of inspiration.
Część Europy potrzebowała pewnego rodzaju inspiracji i zasilenia. W poprzednich odcinkach
In previous episodes, we talked about Anton van Dyck, who drove to England to introduce the basics in English schools.
Dać podwaliny szkoły angielskiej. I dopiero pokolenie później.
And a generation later, amazing English painters were born. The same goes for Poland. These were the foundations. Bernardo Bellotto was another famous Venetian painter in Poland.
Malarz Bernardo Bellotto, w Polsce zwany Canaletto, ale właściwie ten pseudonim artystyczny przynależny jest jego stryjowi.
He gained the artistic nickname Canaletto after his uncle, who accepted the invitation to the English court and commissioned it to his nephew.
Pamiętam pracę dla króla polskiego. Obaj więc przyłożyli się do tworzenia szkół, jeden w Anglii, drugi w Polsce. I rzeczywiście,
as far as I remember, for the Polish king, both of them helped to create a school in England and in Poland.
Trumiennych, bo właśnie na ten okres przypada przecież.
Indeed, I think that's why this is a very important point when we discuss Polish coffin portraits.
Bo jeżeli chodzi o samą.
This was the period of extraordinary artistic formula.
To już oczywiście należy tutaj odnieść tę tradycję do faju.
It was unique, just like Baroque, because the very formula of portrait painting, of course, dates back to the Fayum in Egypt, where in the 1st century the oldest, amazing, beautiful images of this style appeared. Historians, theorists, and analysts discover these portrait paintings of Fayum via groups of Greeks who, after these conquests of Alexander the Great, end up in Egypt.
I właśnie w miejscach, gdzie najliczniej.
This type of painting is located where most of them settled. Fayum's painting was implemented in classical and ancient techniques, such as encaustic or tempera, and these portraits were painted on wood. In the case of Sarmatian, coffin portraits were usually made on zinc sheets and painted with oil, so it was a completely different technology.
I malowane olejno, więc zupełnie inna technologia.
They have a characteristic shape because they were matched to the shape of coffins.
Bo był dopasowywany do kształtu trumny.
Yes, it was matched to the shape of the coffin and it was put onto the coffin lid during commemorations, so it ensured the dead human was present spiritually during these commemorations.
Podczas tych uroczystości, często później po uroczystościach.
Afterwards, the portrait was often placed, for example, in a church where the deceased had been important or was a donor.
Więc ta formuła artystyczna.
So we can say that this artistic formula, which Polish art historians often perceive as a specialty of Polish painting and art, appears alongside these close, well-established authorities and artistic expressions.
Oczywiście można powiedzieć, że niejako obok tych dworskich, oficjalnych, uznanych autorytetów i formuł artystycznych, wyrazowych, pojawia się właśnie ta formuła zupełnie.
It's completely original, and it's amazing to see this one-of-a-kind Sarmatian coffin painting. We must also say something about the costume, which is very original, and about those Oriental influences that shape the origins of Polish Sarmatian clothing.
Które kształtują tą formułę ubioru polskiego sarmaty.
As a seasoned connoisseur of this topic, you can probably say much more about it. So this time, I'll ask you to tell us something about these beautiful parabolas.
Żebyś nam coś o tych karabelach, pięknych kontuszach opowiedział.
To wszystko łączy się w pewną całość i rzeczywiście słowo sarmatyzm, które już padło kilkakrotnie.
All of this creates the whole. And the word Sarmatian, which has come up a few times during our conversation, connects with the concept of Polish Baroque. Although we have to remember that these are not replacements. These are not the same thing. Sarmatism as a trend in art is fashion. Sarmatism as a trend in art, in fashion, in philosophy of life is strongly connected to Baroque. Maybe that's why our nation remembers the Polish Baroque so well.
Narodową, bo to są pamiętniki Paska, to są dzieła Morsztyna.
At this point, we can mention pamiętniki, or a diary in English, which was written by Pasek. There were pieces written by Morsztyn in the battle scenes recalled by Henryk Sienkiewicz a few hundred years later. These works personified this era.
Wytwarza się swoisty strój staropolski, zwany też właśnie strojem sarmackim, który miał nas, czy przodków.
As you said, the clothing is very specific. An old Polish costume known as the Sarmatian costume.
W tym ścisłym rozumieniu słowa, chociaż mogli się do nich zaliczać.
We are talking here about our ancestors of the Polish nation, which was a noble nation. These were the Poles in the strictest sense of the word. Even through Russians, Germans, and people from the Netherlands could be counted among them. It didn't matter. What is important is that they were all noble brothers. And actually, the Sarmatian costume was an important determinant.
Dochody i stopień bogactwa. Najpiękniejsze stroje to były stroje, które do dziś możemy podziwiać na właśnie portretach.
It was expensive and the nobility differed greatly in income and degree of wealth. The most beautiful costumes were the outfits that we can still admire on portraits of the nobility. The most expensive materials are velvet and crimson. Crimson belonged to this highest layer of Polish nobility. The belt, called the slusk sash, was a very characteristic element of the Sarmatian costume. It was also expensive, woven from the most expensive thread. There were silver and gold threads, noble materials. It was several meters long.
Owijał pas, który nie służył właściwie do niczego poza pokazywaniem statusu społecznego.
The noblemen wrapped it around themselves. The belt did not serve a practical purpose and was only worn to indicate social status. Moreover, some belts were double-sided. They were gold and silver, normally during the ordinary time, the liturgical calendar, but they also were black or black-silver from the time of fasting or Advent. You could have just scrolled it down and showed that you kept a fast, that you didn't shine with gold.
Tak jak powiedziałeś, Karabela, królowa polskich szabel.
As you said, the Karabela, the queen of Polish sabers, is very important when it comes to Sarmatism and Polish Baroque. Indeed, it is very characteristic for Polish noble ancestors' perceptions of the world. Although we have to remember that it wasn't the only type of Polish saber. It is indeed a very beautiful weapon. This is a saber with an open handle. If we look at it from the side, it resembles a stylized silhouette of an eagle with a head turned in one direction.
Popatrzymy z boku na szablę, to przypomina ona kształtem stylizowaną sylwetkę orła ze zwróconą w jedną stronę głową, więc to był taki dodatkowy element bardzo ważny. Tak, orzeł jest.
It was a key additional element. The eagle is very important, a hermetical animal. The eagle is very important, a hermetic animal of Poland. It is a bird of prey, so this aggression factor is simultaneously associated with the warrior. The Polish Karabela, despite the fact that it's always been a weapon suitable for decorating and showing the owner's status, is still a fighting weapon, and we have to remember that. It is a weapon that retains useful features.
To jest broń, która zachowuje cechy użytkowe. Była lubiana przez polską szlachtę z kilku powodów.
The Polish nobility liked it for several reasons. It's relatively light and interestingly bbalanced. It was very well suited to the old Polish martial art called cross art.
Bardzo łatwo, bardzo szybko można ją wydobyć z pochwy.
It's very easy to get it out very quickly and use it immediately. We even did some tests with a group of former swordsmen, so we checked how quickly it could be used.
To była broń naprawdę śmiertelnie niebezpieczna i skuteczna.
It was a really deadly, dangerous, and effective weapon, and at the same time, it is suitable for decoration. The sheath and binding of the handle were often decorated with semi-precious stones. In general, the cladding of the hilt was made of semi-precious stones.
Były z kamieni półszlachetnych. Tutaj warto wspomnieć o ważnych ośrodkach produkcji tej broni.
It's worth mentioning the important production centers of this weapon. Armenians have their aggregation in Lviv, the magnificent craftsmen specializing in the production of weapons for centuries. They also decorated weapons which were very much appreciated by the Polish nobility.
Broni, która była bardzo ceniona przez polską szlachtę. To był Kraków, ale to była również Warszawa.
Sabers were produced in Krakow, but also in the northern neighborhoods of Warsaw, in Marymont. The carabella is not the only Polish saber. The famous hussar saber was associated with hussars and military costumes. The carabella is associated with the civilian attire. The hussar saber is associated with a military costume. It is considered one of the most dangerous bladed weapons ever invented.
Uważana jest za jedną z najgroźniejszych broni białych w ogóle wymyślonych.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Poland Daily History. Today we are at the Warsaw Citadel, a structure built by the Russians in the 1830s and later on used as a prison for political dissidents and fighters of the January Uprising of 1863 to 1864. Some of the prisoners held here would later on become prominent figures in Polish politics, while others were executed or sent to Siberia after imprisonment. Today, we will talk to some of the experts about the specifics of the Citadel, the January Uprising, and more history about the era. Our first guest is Michał Cislak, junior custodian at the Museum of the 10th Pavilion in the Warsaw Citadel. So as we know, the January Uprising is against the Russian Empire. And I was wondering if you can tell me how the Russian Empire themselves react to the January Uprising.
Reakcja polityczna strony rosyjskiej była rzecz jasna całkowicie negatywna.
The Russians obviously reacted negatively, but it's important to mention that some of the Russian intelligentsia stood by the Poles. We can name Alexander Herzen, for example, an editor of a very liberal newspaper, Koło Koło, who very clearly stated that the Tsarist authorities should leave Poles alone and meet their demands. He paid a very high price for this, since he was arrested, beaten and humiliated by soldiers of the empire which he was a part of. But this is just one man. The Russians used enormous resources to put an end to the uprising. Their control over the Warsaw-Petersburg railway line played a very important, but sometimes omitted by the historians, role in achieving that. The line, established in 1862, so a year before the January Uprising, enabled the Tsarist army to quickly transport many field artillery troops.
Czyli na niecały rok przed wybuchem powstania styczniowego, pozwalała Rosjanom w bardzo krótkim czasie przerzucać ogromne ilości przede wszystkim pułków artylerii polowej. Artylerii polowej zawsze Polakom w powstaniu brakowało.
Artillery is what the Poles lacked the most, since it was very difficult to get cannons in an occupied country. While the Russians kept sending reinforcements, more and more Poles either died in combat or decided to give up the fight, without many new volunteers joining the insurgency. The Russians also knew that they had to somehow buy the support of Polish farmers. In 1864, they abolished serfdom for Polish peasants, doing it before the Polish underground government, which was already preparing the same thing. The Russians feared that the insurgents, with the help of the farmers, could actually prevail. By abolishing the serfdom first and meeting the most important demand of the peasants, they made it difficult for the whole Polish nation to unite. The farmers left the uprising in huge numbers, not seeing a point in fighting in the woods with someone who gave them so much for almost nothing. Hence, the uprising had to fall. An interesting anecdote: to this day some Russians believe that the money used for abolishing the serfdom came from the sale of Alaska to the United States. The problem is that Alaska was bought by the States in 1867, so 3 years after the uprising. This doesn't add up, but it is a myth that some Russians believe in.
Nie można było tego zrobić w około 3 lata wcześniej, ale taki mit funkcjonuje podobno do dzisiaj w Rosji.
The Russians occupying Poland did not react kindly to the January Uprising. Additional troops were sent to Poland in an attempt to quickly quell the resistance, but the uprising endured for well over a year. Next up, we will talk to Dr. Krzysztof Jabłonka to find out more about Russia's response to the second massive Polish uprising against Russia in 30 years. We will dive deeper into the intricate details about the January Uprising against the Russians. So my question for you today is whether or not the Russians anticipated the uprising. What are the reactions, especially the officials? Did they see it coming?
To jest zdumiewające, że przygotowania powstańcze trwały w zasadzie na oczach Rosjan.
It is quite remarkable that the preparations for the uprising took place right under Russians' noses. Even though they knew that Poles were organizing weapons and secret committees, in example the Town Committee, which later turned into the National Committee, the outbreak of the uprising surprised them. In the so-called Kongresówka or Congressland, established after the Vienna Congress, which was the Polish kingdom in theory but subordinate to the Tsar Empire, there wasn't that many Russian forces. They had only around 100,000 soldiers stationed throughout the country. Russians' first reaction to the uprising was very fortunate for Poles, because they ran from provinces and hid in their garrisons.
Uciekli z prowincji. Polacy na moment stali się władcami wszystkich pól, ziem, wsi, wszystkiego z wyjątkiem dużych miast.
Thanks to that, for a brief time, Poles once again became the rulers of their lands, farms, fields, almost everything except the big cities. You can even count how many Russians were in each city. They dug themselves in their garrisons or blockhouses, and they were nowhere to be seen. However, after a few weeks, Russian soldiers moved out of Warsaw and sent reinforcements to the barricaded garrisons, letting them know that it's safe to come out.
Po pierwszym uderzeniu, gdzie w 33 ośrodkach zaatakowano garnizony rosyjskie, skutecznie zresztą, prawie we wszystkich Polacy wygrali, powstańcy wygrali.
Even though Poles led 33 successful attacks on the Russian garrisons, they could not manage to organize enough troops to defeat them in open battle in winter. I should add that winter conditions were very unfavorable for the insurgents, since the Polish troops hiding in the woods had almost no means to cover the tracks they left in the snow. To tackle the problem, the farmers and peasants did the so-called wypasy. The idea was very simple. After a Polish partisan unit marched near a village, local farmers released cows, sheep, horses and other animals to stomp over the tracks. It happened continuously wherever the Russian forces arrived, and they couldn't do much about it, since farm animals needed to be released to roam in open fields from time to time.
Krów i koni, które zadeptywały ślady po powstańcach. No i gdziekolwiek się pojawiły wojska rosyjskie, tam był ogromny wypas bydła w tym czasie. No był taki zwyczaj, że w zimie, w pogodne dni wypuszczano zwierzę.
There are actually Russian reports on this. Due to the harsh conditions, Tsarist army did not truly fight the uprising until spring. What shocked the old continent was the fact that Poles managed to hold almost all Russian activities in Europe with the uprising. All other countries finally had some breathing room, without the enormous Russian army of 300,000 soldiers to keep in mind. For us, of course, it wasn't that good, since more than 200,000 of them came to the Congressland, conquering it once again, piece by piece. Even still, for a whole year, the Polish forests remained under the insurgents' control.
Niemniej obszar leśny jeszcze przez ponad rok pozostał władztwem polskich powstańców.
The January Uprising was one of the most pivotal moments in the era when Poland was partitioned. The Poles would later on spend decades debating whether or not they had taken the correct path of resistance. During the interwar era, the veterans were treated as heroes, and they would later on serve as an inspiration for the soldiers fighting in the 1944 Warsaw Uprising. That's it for today. I'll see you next time on Poland Daily History.
Poland Daily Travel. We're here in the forest, and I'm not lost because I know exactly where I am.
Hello, and welcome to Poland Daily Travel, where we're taking a snowy trip to the forest. Not a lot of people know that Poland's forests occupy 29% of the country. The vast majority are state or national. We'll be visiting the forest north of Warsaw at Jabłona in Mazowiecki province. This rich tract of woodland lies east of the Wisła, or the Vistula River, and forms a vital part of the green belt around Warsaw, which includes Campinos National Park, a UNESCO-listed biosphere. On our tour, we will be guided by a forest ranger who will give us the lay of the land in one of the forests that form the lungs of the capital city. So stick with us as Poland Daily Travel goes green in the Jabłona forest. Okay, we're back in the forest in Jabłona with Poland Daily Travel. I have here with me Forest Ranger Przemek, and we are talking about all things to do with the forest. Przemek, why is it important to have forests near the cities? What does it do? What is the role of the forest?
The very important role of forests surrounding the Warsaw that majority of the society doesn't know about it.
People don't know this.
People don't know this. Is to supply Warsaw into the fresh air.
I see.
The dominating side of winds in Poland is western. From the west.
The wind's coming from the west. Okay.
The wind's coming from the west. Also, it's almost completely surrounded by forest. Okay. From the west, it has Campinos National Park.
That's the very big park.
Very, very big national
just to
park.
the north of us, north and west. Yeah.
It's at the site of dominating winds in Poland.
Okay, okay. Very dominating winds.
Very dominating winds.
It's over near the Wisła River too, isn't it? Yeah.
From the northern part of Warsaw, neighbors with our forest district, Jabłona.
Right.
Eastern part with forest district Drewnica.
Right. So what
southeastern with forest district Celestynów, and southern with forest district Chojnów.
Okay.
Each of them are abundant of forests.
So
of forest.
Warsaw is ringed by forests.
Ringed about.
It's a ring of forests. Now, but what? So there is an important role that these forests play in keeping the air fresh. Right?
Keeping the air fresh.
But to fall down. It's slippery.
It protects Warsaw against the smoke, against the London fog.
You mean the London fog? You mean is that what you call it? When the smoke is coming from the factories and the cars, yes?
Yes.
And creating this big cloud. And the pollution's quite bad in Warsaw at times, isn't it?
But the fresh air from the forest make the quality of air better, much better.
Yeah, because I've noticed when you look at the air pollution online, you can check the air pollution in Warsaw and in the surrounding metropolitan area. And in the areas of the forests, it's always much, much less. So I guess that's your point, isn't it? That these forests are keeping the air as fresh as possible, despite the pollution from factories.
Despite the pollution from factories.
And motor cars. Yeah, yeah. Interesting. And
the citizens have fresh air for breath.
Yeah, it's breathe. I guess parks in the city do the same thing to some extent, but nothing like the forest, because look around us.
But the forests are much bigger than parks.
Look at this. I mean, it's trees upon trees upon trees without any interruption. Fascinating. So the folks, the trees and the forests around Warsaw play an incredibly important part in keeping the air as fresh as possible, despite an incredible amount of pollution that is produced by a metropolitan area of about 3 million people. And Przemysław, one of his jobs is to remember that and keep this forest as clean and as safe and as pure as possible, so that the air can be kept good and fresh for the people of Warsaw. Okay, that's excellent. Okay, good. Poland Daily Travel. We'll be right back. Okay, when we were walking by before, I noticed these cut logs here, quite a substantial amount of cut logs. You're harvesting the forest here.
Yes, we are harvesting the forest. It's necessary. From time to time, it's necessary to lose the density of the forest, of the trees, in order to make for another trees to more place to live,
smaller
to grow.
Trees to come out,
because
it becomes unmanageable massive trees, and then the trees can't grow. I mean, we see here some very tall ones. Yeah, yeah. So managing the forest is a big part of what you do, isn't it?
Yes,
Yeah.
but from time to time it's necessary to change completely the trees and replace them younger. Replace them younger.
And how do you do that?
By using harvester or sometimes by manual labor. We have workers
who come in. How many workers do you have to do this? I mean, when you do a project for harvesting the wood, how does it start? How do you plan it? How many workers do you use? Does it vary?
Exists something like for forest management plan. It marks the volume of wood which we can get from the forest district.
Well, this is a state forest.
It's a 10 years period of time.
You do it over 10 years.
Over 10 years, yeah. we make the forest management plan.
So when we see trees cut like this, a lot of people would go, "Oh, you're cutting down the forest. It's horrible."
You rob the forest. Yeah. Even you rob
but
the
it's
forest.
not true because you have to cull
It's completely renewable raw materials.
Yeah. And what kind of wood is this? What kind of wood is this?
It's a pine wood.
This is pine, and pines, as we can see here above us,
is the most popular.
It's huge, and they grow very fast, don't they? How long does it take to grow a pine?
From 100 to 120 years.
To grow a full pine?
A full pine.
To the full size.
They are mature.
Yeah, at 120 years. What about to grow it tall enough to cut it and use it to harvest it?
Depends the product. We can use younger trees to make a paper, for example, to make a partial boards or fiber boards.
So when you say younger tree, how young is that tree? So I'm trying to establish that they grow pretty fast to use, yeah?
But by selling it into the sawmills, it should be older.
It should be older. Yeah. How old are these trees, do you think?
We can
count the rings.
We can count the rings.
That might take a while. There's a lot of rings in this one. Yeah?
I think it's more or less
60 years?
It's 6 or more, or even more.
60, 70, maybe 80 years.
60, 70.
We're not going to count all those rings, but forest management's very important, and that's the point, that people have to understand that part of conservation is also cutting trees, not just growing trees.
Nobody...
Much as we love trees. I'm not saying go and cut California redwoods or something.
But some part of trees, even in state forests, will live into the natural decomposition. 5%.
What kind of trees are those that you just leave and never cut? Oak trees or?
Not only each species of
species.
Trees. Some examples of trees aren't precious as a material, but are precious as ecological utility.
What would that be? What do you mean ecological?
With holes, for example, with place for nesting for birds.
Okay, yeah. So that may be more of the hardwood trees and things like that. So I think. No, not necessarily.
Not only, not necessarily.
Pine trees
not
too.
Necessarily.
Pine trees too. What kind are these spruce pines that we were talking about before, or different kind?
It's a Scotch pine.
It's a Scotch pine.
Scotch pine, the most popular species in Poland.
Scotch pine. The most popular species of tree in Poland is the Scotch pine. The Scotch pine. If you remember nothing else, take that away from this trip to the forest. So forest management. Very important. Sometimes you have to cut trees in order to grow trees, and that's what we're learning here. Stay with us, Poland Daily Travel.